You know that moment when your entire world shatters and you realize everything you believed was a lie. I'm talking about that soul-crushing second when the ground disappears beneath your feet and you're free falling into darkness. That's where my story begins. But to understand how I ended up serving my husband a $9.6 million eviction notice, you need to know who I was before everything fell apart. My name is Catherine Montgomery. Well, it used to be Catherine Rhodes before I married him, before I trusted him with everything I had. I was 34 years old, living what everyone around me called a dream life. And honestly, for a while, I believed it too. I met Daniel when I was 28. He was charming, successful, the kind of man who could light up a room just by walking into it. Dark hair always perfectly styled, sharp suits, a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He worked in commercial real estate development, and he was good at it. Really good. But here's the thing nobody knew, the thing that would become the most important detail in this entire story. I was better. See, I came from money. Old money. My grandfather built a commercial property empire across the East Coast. Shopping centers, office buildings, luxury developments. When he passed, he left a substantial trust to me and my brother. But the crown jewel, the thing he loved most, was our beach house in the Hamptons. Not just any beach house. We're talking about a 6-bedroom oceanfront estate with private beach access, infinity pool, guest house, the works. It was appraised at $9.6 million, and my grandfather left it entirely to me. Daniel knew about the beach house, of course. We got married there. It was the most beautiful day of my life, or so I thought at the time. White roses everywhere, the ocean as our backdrop, all our friends and family watching as we promised forever to each other. Forever. What a joke that turned out to be. Before you go any further with this story, I need you to do something for me. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you, this journey of betrayal and justice, it's going to take us to some dark places before we see the light. And I want to know I'm not alone in this, that you're here with me. Okay, so Daniel and I built what looked like the perfect marriage. We had a beautiful home in Manhattan, a place we bought together, though I'll admit I put down the larger portion of the down payment. We traveled, we hosted dinner parties, we were that couple everyone envied, at least on the surface. The beach house became our retreat. Every summer, we'd spend weekends there. Sometimes I'd go alone during the week when I needed to clear my head, to hear the waves and remember who I was before the chaos of the city consumed me. That house was my sanctuary. My grandfather used to take me there when I was little, teach me to swim in that ocean, tell me stories on the wraparound porch while we watched sunsets that looked like paintings. Daniel always loved that house a little too much. I noticed it early on, the way his eyes would sweep over the property with this calculating look. The way he'd mention casually that we could rent it out when we weren't using it, make some income off it. I always shut that down. This wasn't about money. This was about legacy, about family, about having one place in the world that was mine and untouchable. But I trusted him. God, I trusted him completely. And that was my first mistake. We'd been married for 5 years when things started to shift. Little things at first. He was traveling more for work. Chicago, Miami, Boston, always closing deals, always networking, always one more dinner meeting that ran late. I understood. I had my own career managing part of my family's property portfolio. I knew what it meant to be ambitious, to chase success. He'd come home smelling like expensive restaurants and other people's perfume. When I asked about it, he'd laugh it off. Business dinners, client meetings, you know how it is, Catherine. And I did know. Or I thought I did. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You trust them until you have a reason not to. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way he started password protecting his phone. The hushed calls he'd take in the other room. How he became less interested in our plans, our future, our life together. We talked about having kids, but suddenly he was always putting it off. Not the right time, babe. Let's wait another year. Let's get more established first. I buried myself in work to avoid the growing emptiness in our marriage. Turned out that was the smartest thing I could have done, though I didn't know it yet. I was closing deals, managing properties, building my own reputation separate from my family name. I was becoming powerful in my own right, and I was too busy to notice that my husband was building a completely different life behind my back. It was our 6th anniversary when I suggested we spend the weekend at the beach house. Just us, I said. No phones, no work, just reconnecting. Daniel hesitated. Actually hesitated. He'd never done that before. He always loved going to the Hamptons. But he recovered quickly, flashed that $1,000,000 smile, and said, of course, sounds perfect. We never made that trip. He canceled last minute. Emergency in Boston. A deal going sideways. He had to fly out immediately. I was disappointed but understanding. I told him I'd go alone, spend some time with the ocean, maybe do some reading. He got weird about that too. Told me the house was having some plumbing issues, that he'd scheduled contractors to come look at it, that it would be better if I waited a few weeks. I should have questioned it, should have pushed back, but I didn't. I let it go. Added it to the growing list of small, strange things that I kept telling myself didn't mean anything. 3 weeks later, my best friend Jessica called me. She'd been in the Hamptons for a girls' weekend and thought she saw someone at my beach house. She wasn't sure, didn't want to snoop, but she figured I'd want to know since I'd mentioned the plumbing issues and contractors. Someone at the beach house, my beach house, the one Daniel said was under repair. I felt this cold wave wash over me. Jessica kept talking, but I barely heard her. My mind was already racing, already connecting dots I'd been refusing to see. I told her I'd check it out, that it was probably just the property manager or the contractors Daniel mentioned. But I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew. That night, Daniel came home late again. I didn't mention Jessica's call. I watched him instead, really watched him. The way he avoided eye contact. The way he was so focused on his phone. The way he kissed my forehead absently, like I was an obligation, not his wife. I lay awake next to him that night, listening to him sleep, wondering who the man beside me really was, wondering if I'd ever really known him at all. And I made a decision. I was going to the beach house, unannounced, unexpected, and I was going to find out exactly what my husband was hiding from me. I had no idea that decision would change everything. That what I was about to discover would turn me into someone I never thought I could be. Someone capable of the kind of revenge that would leave my husband devastated and broke. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to see the truth with my own eyes. The next morning, I told Daniel I had a property inspection in Connecticut. A complete lie, but it rolled off my tongue so easily it scared me a little. He barely looked up from his coffee and his phone. Just nodded, said he had back-to-back meetings all day anyway, kissed me on the cheek like a reflex. I watched him leave our apartment, watched him climb into the car that would take him to his office in Midtown, or wherever he was really going. At that point, I didn't know what was real anymore. I waited an hour, made sure he'd be deep in his day, wherever that was. Then I got in my car and started the drive to the Hamptons. It's about a 2.5-hour drive from Manhattan, longer if there's traffic. I had plenty of time to think. Too much time, actually. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that there was a perfectly logical explanation. Maybe the property manager was staying there while coordinating the repairs. Maybe Daniel had let a colleague use the house for a few days. Maybe. But deep down, I knew. Women always know. We just sometimes choose not to see it because seeing it means dealing with it, and dealing with it means our lives are about to explode. The drive felt both endless and way too short. Before I knew it, I was pulling into the private road that led to our beach house. The September air was crisp, beautiful. The kind of day that should have been perfect. The ocean was sparkling in the distance, and for a moment, just a brief moment, I let myself remember what this place used to mean to me. Peace, safety, home. I parked down the road, not in the driveway. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Some part of me knew I needed the element of surprise for whatever I was about to walk into. As I approached the house on foot, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Everything looked normal. The gardens were maintained, the shutters were open, the place looked lived in and loved, not like a house under renovation at all. And that's when I saw it, a car in the driveway, a white Mercedes convertible, not mine, not Daniel's, Someone else was here, in my house, in my sanctuary. I felt anger start to replace the fear. This was my property, my house. I had every right to walk right up to that front door and demand answers, and that's exactly what I planned to do. But as I got closer, I heard something that stopped me cold. Laughter. A woman's laughter floating out from the open windows of the back deck. Light, carefree, the kind of laugh you make when you don't have a worry in the world, when you feel safe and happy and home. I moved quietly around the side of the house. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to just knock on the front door, to announce myself, to handle this like an adult. But the other part, the part that was already breaking into pieces, needed to see first, needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I made my way to the deck, staying low, keeping to the shadows of the beach grass and the outdoor shower enclosure. And then I saw her. She was beautiful. I hate that that's the first thing I noticed, but it was. Mid-20s, long dark hair, perfect skin, wearing a bikini that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was lying on one of my lounge chairs, the ones my grandmother had picked out, sipping what looked like a mimosa, completely at ease. My lounge chair, my deck, my house, my mimosa glasses. She was on her phone, video chatting with someone, and then I heard her say something that made my blood run cold. No, seriously, this place is incredible. Daniel's been so generous letting me stay here. I'm basically living like a queen. Daniel. She said his name so casually, so familiarly, like she had every right to it. I must have made a sound, a gasp or something, because she looked up. Our eyes met. For a second, we just stared at each other. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized who I was. There's only so many photos of the wife hanging in a beach house before you recognize her when she shows up. "I'll call you back," she said quickly into her phone and ended the call. She sat up, pulled a cover-up around herself like that would somehow make this better. Hi, you must be Catherine." The audacity, the absolute audacity of this woman to speak my name in my house. "Who are you?" My voice came out cold, flat. I barely recognized it. My name is Amber. Look, this is really awkward, but..." "How do you know my husband?" She bit her lip, actually had the nerve to look uncomfortable. "We work together, or we did. We met through his company and she couldn't even say it. "You're having an affair with Daniel." I said it for her, needed to hear the words out loud. She didn't deny it, just stood there, wrapped in guilt and designer beachwear in the middle of my family legacy. "How long has he been letting you stay here?" I asked. My voice was still calm. Too calm. I was in shock, I think. My body hadn't caught up to what my brain was processing. "A few months," she admitted quietly. He said you two had an understanding, that the marriage was basically over, that you were just together on paper for business reasons. He said you wouldn't care." I actually laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "He said I wouldn't care that he installed his mistress in my family's beach house, the house my grandfather left to me. He said I wouldn't care." Her eyes widened. "Your house. He told me it was his, that he bought it before you got married." Of course he did. Of course Daniel spun her a story that made him look good, made me look like the cold, businesslike wife who didn't care what he did. The lies were stacking up so fast I could barely keep track. "Get out." The words came out quiet but firm. "Look, I didn't know." "Get out," louder this time. "You have 1 hour to pack whatever cheap stuff you brought into my house and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police and having you removed for trespassing." She started to say something else, probably more excuses, more lies Daniel had fed her, but I turned away. I couldn't look at her anymore, couldn't be in that space with her for another second. I walked back around to the front of the house and let myself in with my key. My hands were shaking so badly, it took 3 tries to get it in the lock. Inside was worse, so much worse. The house was full of her clothes in the closet of the master bedroom, my bedroom, her makeup spread across the bathroom counter, her shampoo in the shower. She'd moved in, completely moved in, like this was her home now. I walked through each room in a daze. The guest room that used to be my reading nook had been turned into some kind of yoga studio. There were photos of her and Daniel on the mantel, actual framed photographs of them together, kissing, hugging, playing in the ocean, in my house, on my beach. I found a wine rack I'd never seen before, stocked with expensive bottles. Groceries in the fridge, fancy cheeses and champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries. He was winning and dining her in my sanctuary while telling me the house had plumbing problems. In the study, I found something that made me stop cold. Paperwork, legal documents. I'm not sure why she had them there. Maybe she was looking through things she shouldn't have been, but there they were. And what I saw in those papers changed everything. Daniel had been trying to refinance the beach house, had been shopping for loans using the property as collateral. My property. The one that was in my name only from my inheritance. He'd forged documents, created fake ownership papers, was trying to get money out of my house without my knowledge. That's when the shock started to wear off and the rage set in. The pure, white-hot, clarifying rage that would fuel everything that came next. This wasn't just an affair. This was theft. This was fraud. This was my husband systematically trying to steal my legacy while installing his mistress in the home my grandfather built. I heard footsteps upstairs. Amber, presumably packing. I didn't care anymore. She was a symptom, not the disease. The real problem was Daniel. And Daniel was about to learn a very expensive lesson about who he'd chosen to betray. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Everything. The documents, the photos of them together, the evidence that she'd been living here, all of it. Then I called my lawyer. Then I called my accountant. Then I called the best private investigator in New York City. By the time Amber came downstairs with her suitcases, looking scared and small, I was already building my case. She mumbled something that might have been an apology and hurried out the door. I watched her drive away and didn't feel even a flicker of satisfaction. This wasn't about her. This was about Daniel, and I was going to make sure he lost everything. Just like he'd almost made me lose mine. After Amber left, I sat on the deck of my beach house and stared at the ocean for a long time. The same ocean I'd stared at as a child, as a teenager, as a bride on my wedding day. Except now everything was different. Now I was seeing it through the eyes of a woman who'd been betrayed in the deepest possible way. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful. Cruel, how beautiful it was when my world was falling apart. I'd made the calls, set the wheels in motion. My lawyer, Patricia, had been shocked but not entirely surprised. She'd never particularly liked Daniel, I remembered now. Had questioned some clauses in our prenup, had pushed me to keep certain assets completely separate. I'd thought she was being overly cautious at the time. Now I silently thanked her for her foresight. The private investigator, a woman named Marcus Chen, had asked me pointed questions. How long did I suspect the affair? Were there financial irregularities? Did I want to know everything or just enough for legal purposes? I told her everything. I wanted to know every lie, every moment, every dollar. I wanted the complete picture of who my husband really was. But sitting there alone as darkness started to fall, I realized I couldn't stay in that house. Not tonight. It had been violated, tainted. My sanctuary had become a crime scene of my marriage. I locked up and drove back to Manhattan in the dark. The drive back felt different than the drive there. I wasn't scared or anxious anymore. I was cold, calculating, planning. Daniel was home when I arrived, around 10 p.m. He was in his study on his laptop, drink in hand. He looked up when I walked in and smiled. That same charming smile that I'd fallen for 6 years ago. Hey babe, how was Connecticut? I stared at him, this man I'd shared a bed with, made plans with, promised my life to, and he looked at me like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't spent months lying to my face while his mistress lived in my family home. It was fine, I said flatly, productive. Good, good. He turned back to his computer, dismissed me, like I was an afterthought in my own life. I wanted to scream at him right then, wanted to throw everything I knew in his face and watch him scramble to explain. But I didn't, because I'd learned something important that day. I'd learned that the best revenge isn't hot and immediate. It's cold and calculated and so devastating that they never see it coming. So instead I said goodnight and went to our bedroom. I took a shower, washing off the day, the betrayal, the old version of myself. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My eyes looked different, harder. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Daniel, listening to him breathe, and I planned. Oh, how I planned. By morning, I had a strategy, and over the next few days, I began executing it with precision. First, I met with Patricia, my lawyer. We went through everything. The prenup we'd signed protected most of my inheritance, but New York was a complicated state for divorce. We'd been married for 6 years, we had shared assets, shared accounts. Daniel could make things messy if he wanted to, unless I had leverage. The attempted fraud with the beach house, Patricia said, studying the photos I'd taken of his forged documents. This is serious. This is criminal. We can use this. I want more than just a clean divorce, I told her. I want him to lose everything. She looked at me over her glasses. Catherine, I understand you're angry and you have every right to be, but we need to be smart about this. What exactly are you proposing? That's when I laid out my plan. And even Patricia, who'd been practicing law for 30 years and had seen everything, looked impressed. While I was building my legal case, Marcus Chen was building my evidence file. And what she found was so much worse than I'd imagined. The affair with Amber had been going on for 8 months, but she wasn't the first. There had been others, at least 3 that Marcus could confirm, possibly more. Daniel had a pattern. Meet them through work, wine and dine them, promise them the world, use my money and my assets to impress them, then move on when he got bored. Amber had lasted longer than the others because Daniel had bigger plans for her. According to Marcus's digging, Daniel had been planning to leave me, but not empty-handed. Oh no, he'd been systematically trying to get access to my trusts, my properties, my money. The beach house refinance was just the beginning. Marcus found evidence that Daniel had been in contact with shady financial advisors about how to claim rights to inherited property in a divorce. He'd been building a case to argue he deserved half of everything, including assets I'd brought into the marriage, because he'd supported my career and we'd built our life together. The audacity was breathtaking. But here's where it got really interesting. In trying to refinance the beach house, Daniel had committed actual fraud. He'd forged my signature on documents. He'd created fake financial statements. He'd lied to lenders about his ownership rights. These weren't just moral failings or civil matters. These were crimes. We have him, Marcus said when she delivered her full report. Completely. The question is, what do you want to do with it? I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I spent a week acting completely normal. I went to work, came home, had dinners with Daniel where we made small talk about nothing important. He had no idea I knew. No idea that I'd been to the beach house. No idea that I'd seen Amber or found his forged documents or hired an investigator. I was calm, pleasant, even, and I think that unsettled him more than anger would have. A few times I caught him looking at me strangely, like he was trying to figure out if I suspected something. During that week, I quietly moved my most valuable jewelry from our apartment to a safety deposit box. I documented every shared asset we had. I made copies of all our financial records. I transferred money from our joint accounts into my personal accounts, carefully, not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to protect myself. I also reached out to some of Daniel's business associates under the guise of planning a surprise for him. What I was actually doing was finding out exactly how solid his professional reputation was, who his partners were, what deals he had in motion. Knowledge is power, and I was gathering an arsenal. On day 8, Amber called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I need to talk to you, she said. She sounded different than she had at the beach house. Scared. We met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood where neither of us would run into anyone we knew. She looked terrible, honestly. Dark circles under her eyes, no makeup, hair pulled back messily. He's threatening me, she said as soon as we sat down. Daniel, when he found out you'd kicked me out of the beach house, he lost it. He's saying I exposed everything, that I ruined his plans. He's threatening to ruin my career, to tell everyone I'm unstable. Catherine, I'm scared. I sipped my coffee and studied her. A month ago, I would have felt nothing but hatred for this woman. But now, looking at her, I just saw another one of Daniel's victims. A younger, more naive one, but a victim nonetheless. Tell me everything, I said. Every promise he made you, every lie he told you, every detail of your relationship. And I'll make sure he can't hurt either of us ever again. She did. For 2 hours, Amber spilled everything. How Daniel had told her he was separated from me. How he'd promised to divorce me and marry her. How he'd said the beach house was his and that someday all his wealth would be theirs to share. How he'd been pressuring her to do things that made her uncomfortable, to lie for him, to help him with his schemes. By the time she finished, I had enough ammunition to destroy him 10 times over. But I wanted to be strategic, precise. I wanted the punishment to fit the crime. Here's what's going to happen, I told Amber. You're going to write down everything you just told me in a sworn statement. You're going to work with my lawyer and my investigator. And in exchange, I'll make sure Daniel can't touch you. I'll make sure you're protected. Why would you help me? She asked, tears streaming down her face. I slept with your husband. Because he's not really my husband, I said. Not anymore. He's just a problem I'm about to solve. And you're not my enemy, Amber, you're my witness. She agreed. Within days, Patricia had her full statement, notarized and legally binding. Now I had everything I needed. The affair, documented with photos and testimony. The fraud, documented with forged papers and paper trails. The pattern of behavior, documented through multiple women and multiple schemes. Daniel's entire house of cards, ready to collapse. I decided the beach house would be where it all ended, where it had started, in a way, where he'd made his biggest, most arrogant mistake. I called Daniel at work on a Friday afternoon. Hey, I was thinking we should spend the weekend in the Hamptons. The weather's supposed to be beautiful, just us, reconnecting. What do you think? There was a pause. I could practically hear his mind working, trying to figure out if this was a trap. But his arrogance won out. He probably figured I still didn't know, that he'd covered his tracks well enough. Sure, babe, he said. That sounds perfect. Great, I said sweetly. I'll meet you there around 6. I've got a surprise planned. I did have a surprise planned, just not the kind he was expecting. I drove out to the beach house early that Friday. Patricia met me there, along with Marcus and someone else I'd brought into my plan. A real estate attorney named David Kowalski who specialized in property law and asset protection. We spent the afternoon preparing. Documents were laid out on the dining room table. Certain calls were queued up, ready to make. Everything was in place. At exactly 6 p.m., I heard Daniel's car pull into the driveway. I watched from the window as he got out, overnight bag in hand, that confident swagger in his step. He thought he was coming for a romantic weekend with his wife. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. He walked in calling my name. Catherine's babe, where are you? In here, I called from the dining room. He walked in with a smile that died the second he saw Patricia and the others. What? What's going on? Sit down, Daniel, I said calmly. We need to talk about your eviction. His face went pale. My what? I slid a document across the table to him. This is a cease and desist order barring you from this property. This beach house, as you know, is my sole property, inherited from my grandfather. You have no legal claim to it. You are hereby notified that you are no longer welcome here, and any attempt to access this property will be considered trespassing. Catherine, what the hell? I'm not finished. I slid another document across. This is documentation of your attempted fraud. You forged my signature trying to refinance this property. That's a felony, Daniel. Multiple felonies, actually. I watched the blood drain from his face as he picked up the papers with shaking hands. And this, I said, sliding a third document, is a petition for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud, along with a restraining order preventing you from accessing any of my inherited assets or trust funds. You can't. I can, and I have. You see, Daniel, you made a critical mistake. You assumed I was weak, that I would never find out, that even if I did, I wouldn't have the spine to do anything about it. You underestimated me. Fatally. He looked around the room at the faces staring back at him with professional coldness. This is insane. You're overreacting to you installing your mistress in my family home while committing financial fraud. My voice was ice. I don't think I'm overreacting at all. If anything, I'm being generous by giving you the chance to handle this quietly. What do you want? His voice cracked. And that's when I smiled, because I had him, completely and totally. Everything, I said. I want everything. The silence in that room was deafening. Daniel stared at me like he'd never seen me before, and maybe he hadn't. Maybe the Catherine he thought he knew, the trusting wife who believed his lies and looked the other way, had never really existed. Or maybe she had, and he'd destroyed her. Everything, he finally repeated. His voice sounded hollow. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Montgomery, what my client means is that she wants a full accounting of all marital assets, full disclosure of all your financial activities during the marriage, and a divorce settlement that reflects both your infidelity and your attempted fraud. He turned to me, ignoring Patricia completely. Catherine, please, can we talk about this alone? This is our marriage. We don't need lawyers and... Our marriage? I laughed, and it came out bitter. Daniel, we haven't had a marriage in months, maybe years. What we had was you lying to me every single day while you played house with a 25-year-old in the home my grandfather built. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I leaned forward. Please, explain to me what it was like. Explain how you told Amber you were separated from me, how you told her this house was yours, how you forged my signature to try to steal from me. I'm dying to hear your version of events. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I never meant to hurt you. And that's when something inside me broke. Not in the way you might think, not with tears and hysterics. It broke quietly, cleanly, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Because that's what people always say, isn't it? I never meant to hurt you. As if intention somehow erases impact. As if not meaning to makes it better. You didn't mean to hurt me, I said slowly, but you did it anyway. Every day for 8 months. Every time you kissed me goodbye and went to her. Every time you told me you loved me while planning to rob me. Every time you touched me after touching her. He flinched. Good. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain coursing through my veins. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. You're going to sign a separation agreement tonight. You're going to move out of our Manhattan apartment by Monday. You're going to cooperate fully with the divorce proceedings. And if you do all of that quietly and without fighting me, I won't press criminal charges for the fraud. And if I don't, there was a flash of the old Daniel, defiant, arrogant. I nodded to David, the property attorney, who slid another folder across the table. Then I file a criminal complaint on Monday morning. You'll be arrested for forgery, fraud, and identity theft. Your business partners will find out. Your clients will find out. Your family will find out. And instead of negotiating a divorce settlement, you'll be negotiating a plea deal. Daniel grabbed the folder, his hands shaking as he flipped through the evidence. Copies of the forged documents, screenshots of emails between him and the loan officers where he claimed to be the sole owner of the property. Text messages between him and Amber where he talked about securing the beach house asset. It was all there, undeniable. You've been spying on me, he said weakly. I've been protecting myself, I corrected. There's a difference. He looked up at me then, and for just a second I saw something in his eyes. Maybe remorse, maybe just fear of consequences. I didn't care which. I loved you, he said quietly. I do love you, I made mistakes. We can fix this. Marriage counseling, therapy, whatever you want, just don't do this. And that's when the anger really hit me. Not the cold, calculating anger that had fueled my planning. The hot, searing kind that rises up from your gut and consumes everything in its path. You loved me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You don't destroy people you love, Daniel. You don't steal from them. You don't replace them. You don't turn their safe spaces into your love nest and think that's what love looks like. My voice was rising now, months of suppressed emotion finally breaking through. You know what my grandfather told me when he gave me this house? He said it was mine, forever mine, a place where I would always be safe, always be home, and you took that from me. You violated the one place in this world that was supposed to be untouchable. Tears were burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him, not here. Every room in this house now has memories of your betrayal. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every window with that ocean view. You poisoned it. And you think saying you love me makes that okay. Catherine, he stood up, reached for me. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't you ever touch me again. Patricia stood as well, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Professional, grounding. I think my client has made her position clear. You have a choice to make, Mr. Montgomery. We can handle this discreetly and civilly, or we can make it very public and very painful. What's it going to be? Daniel looked between all of us. I watched the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was trying to find an angle, a way out, something he could manipulate to his advantage. But there wasn't one. I'd made sure of that. I need time to think, he said finally. You have until noon tomorrow, Patricia said crisply. Sign the separation agreement and begin the process cooperatively, or we file criminal charges Monday morning. Those are your options. This is extortion, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, I said quietly. This is justice, there's a difference. We left him there in the dining room of my beach house, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes and the ruins of his lies. Patricia, Marcus, David, and I walked out together. I didn't look back. Outside, the sun had fully set. The ocean was a dark mass in the distance, waves crashing in rhythm. The sound used to comfort me. Now it just sounded like chaos. Are you okay? Patricia asked as we stood by our cars. Was I okay? I'd just confronted my husband with evidence of his affair and fraud. I'd threatened him with criminal charges. I'd demanded a divorce and essentially held his entire future hostage. Was I okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. You did the right thing, Marcus said. He deserved every word of that. Deserving it doesn't make it easier, I replied. I drove back to Manhattan that night, but I didn't go to our apartment. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I went to a hotel. A nice one, the kind with room service and thick robes and sheets with a thread count higher than my mortgage payment. I ordered wine I didn't drink and food I didn't eat. I sat by the window looking out at the city lights, this city I'd called home for over a decade, and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The grief hit first. Grief for my marriage, for the future I'd imagined, for the version of Daniel I'd thought I'd married. That man didn't exist. Maybe he never had, but I'd loved who I thought he was, and mourning that loss was real even if the man wasn't. Then came the anger again, wave after wave of it. How dare he take my trust, my love, my home, my security and treat it all like it meant nothing? How dare he think he could get away with it? And underneath it all, the fear of being alone, fear of what came next, fear that maybe there was something wrong with me, that I'd somehow caused this or missed signs I should have seen or failed in some fundamental way. I know that's not logical. I know his choices were his own. But when you're sitting alone in a hotel room at midnight while your husband is probably still at your beach house trying to figure out how to save himself, logic doesn't always win. I cried. Finally, I let myself cry. Not the pretty kind of crying they show in movies. The ugly kind. The kind where you can't breathe and your whole body shakes and you make sounds you didn't know you could make. I cried for the girl who'd married Daniel on that beach 6 years ago. For the woman who'd trusted him completely. For every moment of the past 8 months that I'd suspected something was wrong but talked myself out of it. For my grandfather, who'd given me that house as a symbol of love and safety and had no idea it would become the setting for my greatest betrayal. When the tears finally stopped, it was almost 3 a.m. I was exhausted, hollowed out, but also strangely lighter, like crying had released some of the poison Daniel had put into my system. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. My hair was a mess. I looked like I'd been through a war, and in a way I had. But I was still standing, battered and bruised and heartbroken, but standing. "You're going to survive this," I told my reflection. "You're going to do more than survive. You're going to win." And I meant it, because Daniel had made a critical error. He'd assumed that because he'd broken my heart, he'd broken my spirit. He didn't understand that those were two very different things. My phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. He signed. "Separation agreement executed at 2:47 a.m. You're free." I stared at those words. You're free. Was I? Or was I just beginning a different kind of imprisonment, one where I'd always be the woman whose husband betrayed her, whose marriage failed, whose trust was shattered? No, I refused to let that be my story. My story was going to be about the woman who fought back, who took her power back, who turned betrayal into strength and pain into purpose. Daniel thought signing that agreement ended this. He thought he'd escaped criminal charges and could walk away relatively unscathed, maybe lose some money, but keep his reputation and his business intact. He had no idea what was coming, because the separation agreement was just step one. The real revenge, the kind that would leave him truly devastated, was still being built. And I was going to enjoy every minute of watching it unfold. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, financial audits, and discoveries that made my blood boil all over again. Daniel had moved out of our apartment as agreed, taking only his personal belongings. He'd been quiet, almost meek, probably thinking his cooperation would earn him some goodwill in the divorce proceedings. What he didn't know was that, while he was busy trying to appear compliant, my team was digging deeper into his financial life than he ever imagined possible. Marcus Chen had become my secret weapon. The woman was relentless. Where I saw dead ends, she saw opportunities. Where Daniel thought he'd covered his tracks, she found footprints. "You need to see this," Marcus said one morning, spreading documents across my new temporary office. I'd rented executive space in Midtown, some place that was mine and mine alone, untainted by Daniel's presence. I looked at the papers, bank statements, credit card bills, wire transfer receipts. What am I looking at? "Your husband's secret spending," Marcus said, pointing to highlighted entries. "Over the past 2 years, he spent approximately $470,000 on his affairs." My stomach dropped. $470,000. Jewelry, trips, rent payments for an apartment I didn't even know about, shopping sprees, restaurant bills. He's been living a completely separate life, Catherine, and funding it with money from your joint accounts. I felt dizzy. We did joint accounts for household expenses, accounts we both contributed to, but that I'd admittedly funded more heavily given my family wealth. I'd trusted him with access to that money. Never thought to monitor it closely because why would I? He was my husband. "This apartment," I said, focusing on one of the entries. "Where is it?" "Chelsea, nice building. He's been renting it for 18 months. According to the doorman I spoke to, multiple women have been seen coming and going. Amber was just the most recent." Multiple women. Multiple. Like I was running some kind of rotation. "Can we use this in the divorce?" I asked. "Absolutely. This is marital asset dissipation. He spent marital funds on extramarital affairs. In New York, that's a big deal. You can argue he owes you back every penny plus damages." I did the math. $470,000 plus damages, plus my legal fees, plus the value of the emotional distress. We were talking about over $1 million just from this alone. "What else did you find?" I asked, because I could tell from Marcus's expression there was more. She pulled out another folder. "Daniel's business is in trouble, serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where he's been taking out loans he can't pay back, promising investors returns he can't deliver. His last 3 commercial developments have fallen through, but he's been hiding that fact by shuffling money between accounts to make it look like he's still solvent." "He's running a shell game," I said slowly. "Essentially, yes, and he was planning to use your assets to bail himself out. The beach house refinance was just the beginning. I found draft loan applications for other properties in your family trust. He was going to try to forge his way into your entire inheritance. The scope of his betrayal kept expanding. It wasn't just about wanting someone younger or prettier. It wasn't even just about the affair. It was about money. My money. He'd married me, at least in part, for access to my wealth. And when his own business started failing, he decided my inheritance was his escape route. "How much does he owe?" I asked. Marcus consulted her notes. Conservatively, about $3 million, but his debt is structured in a way that makes it hard to track. Multiple LLCs, offshore accounts, loans from private lenders. He's been very clever about hiding it. But you found it. She smiled. I'm better at hiding than he is at seeking. Over the next week, Patricia and I built a strategy that was frankly beautiful in its thoroughness. We would go after Daniel for dissipation of marital assets, the $470,000 spent on affairs, attempted fraud, the beach house refinance, breach of fiduciary duty, using marital funds for his failing business without disclosure, emotional distress damages, full legal fees. But that was just the divorce case. The criminal case was a separate beast entirely. If we pursue criminal charges, Patricia explained, he could face up to 15 years for the forgery and fraud. But that's a long shot. First-time offender, white-collar crime, good lawyers. He'd probably plea down to probation and fines. But his reputation would be destroyed, I said. Completely. No one in commercial real estate would touch him with a 10-foot pole. He'd be unemployable in his field. I thought about that. Part of me wanted to see him in prison, wanted him to lose his freedom like he'd stolen my peace of mind. But the practical part of me knew that wasn't the best revenge. What if we use the threat of criminal charges as leverage? I proposed. Keep it hanging over his head to force a better divorce settlement. Patricia considered this. It's an option, though ethically murky. We'd need to be careful about how we frame it. I don't want to be unethical, I said quickly, but I also don't want to let him off easy. What if, Patricia said slowly, thinking it through, we file the criminal complaint but indicate we're open to restitution as an alternative to prosecution? It's not uncommon in fraud cases. He'd have to pay back everything he tried to steal, plus penalties, plus agree to very unfavorable divorce terms. If he refuses, the criminal case proceeds. That's legal. Perfectly. We're giving him a choice. Make full financial restitution and cooperate in the divorce, or face criminal prosecution. It's not extortion because we have legitimate grounds for the charges. We're just offering him an alternative resolution. I liked it. It gave Daniel a choice, but both options ended with him losing. Either he paid me back everything and then some, or he faced criminal charges. Win-win for me. But there was one more element I wanted to add to this revenge. One that had nothing to do with money or legal consequences. His business partners, I said. Do they know his company is failing? Marcus shook her head. I don't think so. He's been keeping up appearances. Still showing up at industry events, still talking big about future projects. What if they found out? What if they knew he was drowning in debt and fraud? They'd distance themselves immediately, Marcus said. Probably force him out of any joint ventures. His professional network would collapse. I thought about Daniel's pride. His reputation meant everything to him. He loved being seen as successful, powerful, connected. He loved walking into rooms and having people know his name. Can we make sure the right people find out? I asked. Patricia held up a hand. Catherine, be very careful here. We can't engage in defamation or tortious interference with his business relationships. I'm not talking about lying, I said. I'm talking about the truth. His debts are a matter of public record, aren't they? Once we file the divorce petition with all our evidence. Once filed, yes, divorce proceedings are public record in New York. Anyone could access them. And if someone, say, a journalist or a business columnist, happened to be looking through public records and found a very interesting divorce case involving a prominent real estate developer. Patricia smiled despite herself. That would be entirely out of our control. We can't stop the press from reporting on public information. No, I agreed. We certainly can't. I had a friend from college who worked at a major New York business publication. We'd stayed in touch over the years, had lunch every few months. She'd always been interested in stories about corporate fraud and financial misdeeds. I wondered how interested she'd be in a story about a real estate developer living a double life while running his business into the ground. Very interested, as it turned out. "Catherine, this is incredible," Diane said when I met her for coffee. "But I have to ask, are you sure you want this to go public? It's going to be messy, for both of you." "I'm already living in messy," I told her. "At least this way, everyone knows the truth. He doesn't get to control the narrative. He doesn't get to paint me as the cold wife who didn't understand him or the gold digger who took him for everything. The facts speak for themselves." "When are you filing the divorce petition?" "Next week. Then I'll have a researcher checking the public records daily. When it hits, we'll move fast." I felt a twinge of something. Not quite guilt, but something adjacent to it. Was I going too far? Was destroying his reputation and his business on top of the divorce and potential criminal charges overkill? Then I remembered Amber living in my beach house. Daniel's forged signatures on loan documents. The $470,000 of my money spent on his affairs. The 18-month apartment I never knew about. The multiple women. The lies upon lies upon lies. No, this wasn't overkill. This was proportional. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since discovering Daniel's betrayal. I went back to the beach house, not to confront anyone or gather evidence, just to be there, to try to reclaim it. I walked through every room, trying to replace the images of Amber and Daniel with new memories. I sat on the deck where I'd found her and forced myself to stay there until the anger subsided. I swam in the ocean, letting the salt water wash over me like a baptism. My grandfather had left me this house because he loved me, because he wanted me to have a place of my own in this world. Daniel had tried to take that from me, but he'd failed. I was still here. The house was still mine, and I was going to keep it. I thought about selling it, honestly, starting fresh somewhere new, somewhere untainted. But then I realized that would mean letting Daniel win, letting him take this from me even after everything else, and I refused to give him that power. So instead, I decided to make new memories here. Better ones. Stronger ones. This house had been my past, and Daniel had tried to ruin it. Now it would be my future, and I'd build it into something he could never touch. As I sat watching the sunset that Saturday evening, my phone rang. Patricia. "We have a problem," she said. "Daniel's filed a counterpetition for the divorce." My heart sank. What's he claiming? That you've been financially controlling throughout the marriage. That you've isolated him from his own money and career opportunities. That the separation agreement he signed was under duress and should be invalidated. And he's asking for spousal support. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Spousal support, from me, after everything he's done. "It's a strategy," Patricia said. "He's trying to paint himself as the victim, make you look like the aggressor. If he can get the separation agreement thrown out, we're back to square one on criminal charges being perceived as leverage." "Can he get it thrown out?" "It's possible. If he can prove you coerced him into signing, that there was no independent counsel present for him, that he didn't have time to review the terms thoroughly." "There were 3 lawyers in the room," I said. "None of them were his, but—" "Exactly. He's arguing he should have had his own representation and that we took advantage of his emotional state." I felt the rage building again. Even now, even caught red-handed in his affairs and his fraud, Daniel was trying to spin this, trying to make himself the victim and me the villain. "What do we do?" I asked. "We fight back," Patricia said simply. "We file our full petition with every piece of evidence we have. We make the counter-petition look like exactly what it is, a desperate attempt by a guilty man to avoid consequences. And we do it Monday morning, before he can control any more of the narrative." "Then that's what we do." "Catherine," Patricia said, her voice softening slightly, This is going to get ugly, very ugly. Are you prepared for that? I looked out at the ocean, at the house my grandfather built, at the life I was reclaiming piece by piece. I'm prepared, I said. Let's take him down. Monday morning came fast. I barely slept the night before, running through everything in my mind. Every piece of evidence, every legal argument, every possible way Daniel could try to wiggle out of this. Patricia had assembled what she called our nuclear option, a divorce petition so comprehensive, so thoroughly documented that it would be impossible to refute. 57 pages of exhibits, documentation, and testimony. It was a work of art, really. A devastating, marriage-ending work of art. We filed at 9 a.m. By 9:30, copies had been served to Daniel at his new apartment and at his office. By 10, my phone started ringing. Daniel, I didn't answer. He called 6 more times, left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to desperate. Catherine, what the hell is this? We had an agreement, you can't just beep. This is insane. You've lost your mind, call me back right now. Beep. Please, just talk to me. We can work this out like adults. Beep. I listened to each one once, then deleted them. There was nothing left to say to him. The court document said everything that mattered. By noon, Diane called. It's public. We're running the story tomorrow. I wanted to give you a heads up. What's the angle? I asked. Real estate developer's house of cards. How Daniel Montgomery built an empire on fraud and lies. We're focusing on the business side mostly, the failing company, the debt, the forged documents. The affair is mentioned, but it's not the centerpiece. This is a business fraud story that happens to involve a messy divorce. Perfect, I said, because it was. It positioned Daniel as a criminal first, an adulterer second. It wasn't a tabloid scandal, it was a legitimate business exposé. His lawyers are going to come after us, Diane warned. Defamation, invasion of privacy, the works. Everything in the story is documented in public court filings, right? Every single word. Then let them come. Truth is an absolute defense. The article ran Wednesday morning. Front page of the business section, online version pushed to the top of the site. By 8 a.m., it had been shared 12,000 times. By noon, other outlets were picking it up. Business Insider, Bloomberg, even the Wall Street Journal ran a smaller piece. My phone exploded. Friends I hadn't talked to in years calling to ask if I was okay. My brother calling from London, furious on my behalf, asking if he needed to fly home. My mother, who'd never particularly liked Daniel, saying, I told you there was something off about that man. But the calls that mattered most were the ones I wasn't getting. The calls Daniel was getting, or rather, not getting anymore. Marcus had sources at his office. By Wednesday afternoon, she reported back. His partners are in emergency meetings. 2 of his biggest investors have pulled out of current deals. His assistant quit, and his lawyer called Patricia asking if there was any way to settle this quietly before more damage is done. What did Patricia say? She said we'd consider settlement discussions if Mr. Montgomery was prepared to accept full responsibility and meet our financial terms. Which are? Everything. We're asking for everything. I met with Patricia and her team that afternoon to go over our settlement demands. They'd calculated what Daniel owed me down to the penny, and then added on top of that. $470,000 for dissipated marital assets, Patricia read from her list. $2 million for attempted fraud and the diminished value of the beach house property due to his actions. Wait, how does his affair diminish the value of the house? I interrupted. Emotional value, future use value, the cost of essentially psychologically reclaiming a space that was violated. It's a bit of a reach, but given his actions, I think we can make the argument. Continue. $1.5 million in punitive damages for emotional distress. All legal fees, which are currently at $200,000 and climbing. Total current settlement demand, $4.17 million. I whistled. Does he even have that much? On paper, yes. He'd have to liquidate essentially everything. His stake in his company, his retirement accounts, his car collection, probably his new apartment. He'd be starting over from zero. And if he doesn't settle, we proceed with the divorce trial and pursue criminal charges, in which case he might end up with even less, plus a criminal record. It was a beautiful trap. Settle and lose everything financially, or fight and lose everything financially plus his freedom. There's one more thing, I said. I want the Manhattan apartment, the one we shared. Patricia raised an eyebrow. That's marital property. You'd have to buy out his half, which given its value. I don't care. I want him out of that space completely. Whatever his equity is, add it to the settlement. I'll pay him for his half, and then he has no claim to any property anywhere that I might ever use. That'll add another $800,000 to what you're paying him, Patricia warned. I know, do it anyway. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about total separation. I wanted Daniel to have nothing of mine, and I wanted nothing of his. Clean break, complete severance. The money was just a tool to achieve that. Thursday, Daniel's lawyer called asking for a meeting. Friday morning, we sat across from each other in a conference room at Patricia's firm. Daniel looked terrible, like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Dark circles under his eyes, suit rumpled, that confident swagger completely gone. He wouldn't look at me, kept his eyes on the table or on his lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Chen who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. My client is prepared to discuss settlement, Rebecca said, but your demands are frankly outrageous. $4 million, that's punitive, not equitable. Your client committed fraud and adultery, Patricia said calmly. Our demands reflect the severity of his actions. The fraud allegations are exaggerated. He made a mistake with some paperwork. He forged his wife's signature on loan documents, Patricia interrupted. Multiple documents, that's not a mistake, that's a crime. Rebecca shifted tactics. The dissipation of assets claim is inflated. You're counting every dinner, every gift, every dollar he spent on his affairs using marital funds, Patricia finished. We have receipts, all $470,000 worth. I watched Daniel while the lawyers argued, watched him shrink into himself with each number, each piece of evidence, each irrefutable fact. This was the man who'd promised to love me forever, who'd vowed to cherish me, who'd stood on my beach and looked into my eyes and lied. Daniel, I said quietly. The lawyers stopped talking. Everyone looked at me. Do you have anything to say to me? He finally met my eyes. I'm sorry, he said. His voice cracked. Catherine, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I destroyed us, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Are you sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? He flinched. Both, I don't know, I'm sorry. That's not good enough, I said. Sorry doesn't give me back the years I wasted on you. Sorry doesn't erase Amber living in my grandfather's house. Sorry doesn't undo the $470,000 you stole from our marriage to fund your double life. I'll pay it back, he said desperately. All of it, whatever you want. I'll sell everything, You'll pay it back because you have no choice, I corrected. Not because you're sorry, because if you don't settle, you'll face criminal charges and end up in even worse shape. This isn't you making amends, Daniel. This is you trying to save yourself. What do you want from me? He asked, and he actually sounded broken. I want you to sign the settlement agreement. I want you out of my life completely and permanently, and I want you to live with what you did. Every day, for the rest of your life, I want you to remember that you had something real and you destroyed it for nothing. Rebecca cleared her throat. Mrs. Montgomery, perhaps we could take a short break. No, I said, standing up. No break. Daniel, you have until 5 p.m. today to accept our settlement terms. Every single term, no negotiations, no changes. If you sign, we drop the criminal complaint and this ends. If you don't sign, we file the criminal charges on Monday, and I will personally make sure every news outlet in this city knows exactly who you are and what you've done. You've already done that, he said bitterly. That was just the business section, I replied. Wait until the tabloids get hold of it. Wait until they start digging into Amber and the other women. Wait until your mother finds out from page 6 instead of from you. His face went white. He hadn't told his family yet. I'd counted on that. 5 p.m., I repeated. Sign or don't, I honestly don't care anymore which you choose. Either way, I win. I walked out of that conference room, feeling lighter than I had in months. Patricia caught up with me in the hallway. That was risky, she said, giving him an ultimatum like that. Will he sign? Oh, he'll sign. His lawyer knows he's out of options. I give it 2 hours max. She was wrong. It took 45 minutes. At 11:47 a.m., Rebecca sent over the signed settlement agreement. Daniel had agreed to every term. The money, the timeline, the property divisions, everything. In one signature, my marriage was essentially over, and Daniel Montgomery was financially destroyed. Patricia called me with the news. It's done, he signed. I was in my temporary office, looking out at the city. Just like that. Just like that. We'll file the signed agreement with the court this afternoon. The divorce won't be final for a few months, but the financial terms are locked in. He can't back out now. And the criminal charges. We'll file a declination with the DA's office, stating that restitution has been made and we're not pursuing charges. It's over, Catherine. You won. I'd won $4 million. The beach house secure in my name alone. The Manhattan apartment mine completely. Daniel forced to sell everything he owned to pay me back. His business reputation in ruins. His professional network scattered. His perfect life destroyed just as thoroughly as he'd destroyed mine. I should have felt triumphant, victorious, satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. Thank you, Patricia, I said, for everything. You did this, she replied. I just filed the paperwork. You're the one who had the strength to fight back. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. Trusting, maybe a little naive, definitely conflict avoidant. I would have done anything to keep the peace, to keep my marriage intact, to avoid the messiness of confrontation. That woman was gone. The person I'd become was harder, sharper, less willing to accept anything less than what she deserved. Daniel had meant to break me. Instead, he'd forged me into something stronger. But strength came with a cost. And sitting there in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my victory, I couldn't help but wonder what I'd lost along with what I'd won. The news of the settlement spread fast. By Monday, everyone in our social circle knew. By Wednesday, the business press had picked up the story. Real estate developer settles divorce for undisclosed sum after fraud allegations, read one headline. Montgomery to sell stake in company following marital scandal, read another. I stopped reading them after a while. It felt voyeuristic, looking at my life dissected in news articles and comment sections. People I'd never met had opinions about my marriage, my choices, my settlement. Some called me a gold digger who trapped a man and then destroyed him. Others called me a hero for standing up to fraud and infidelity. Most people didn't care beyond the entertainment value of watching someone else's life implode. The hardest part was the friends. Our friends, I should say, though they stopped being ours pretty quickly. Some immediately took my side, cutting Daniel off and rallying around me with offers of support and wine and righteous anger. Others disappeared entirely, too uncomfortable with the messiness to reach out to either of us. And a few, a small but painful few, suggested I was overreacting. That affairs happen, that I should have tried counseling, that destroying Daniel financially was vindictive and cruel. I cut those people out without hesitation. Anyone who thought what Daniel did deserved forgiveness or understanding had clearly never been betrayed like that. Or maybe they had been, and they'd chosen acceptance over justice. Either way, they weren't my people anymore. My brother flew in from London 2 weeks after the settlement was finalized. James had always been protective of me, even though I was older by 18 months. When our parents divorced, we'd clung to each other. When our grandfather died, we'd mourned together. And now, facing the wreckage of my marriage, he showed up. You should have called me sooner, he said over dinner at my favorite Italian place. I would have flown back immediately. I needed to handle it myself, I told him. Needed to prove to myself I could. And you did, spectacularly from what I've read. He smiled, but there was concern in his eyes. How are you really doing, Kath? I considered lying, giving him the strong, unshakable version of events. But this was James. If I couldn't be honest with him, who could I be honest with? I'm angry, I admitted. Still, even after everything, even after winning, I'm still so angry. At Daniel for doing this. At myself for not seeing it sooner. At the universe for letting this happen in the first place. That's normal, James said. You're allowed to be angry. But for how long? How long until I'm just the bitter ex-wife who can't let go? How long until my anger starts poisoning me instead of protecting me? He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're not poisoned, Kath. You're healing. And healing isn't linear or pretty or quick. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it looks like anger. I took $4 million from him, I said quietly. I destroyed his career, his reputation, everything he built. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and think, did I go too far? Did you? James asked, not judgmental, just curious. I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I said finally. He stole from me, he betrayed me. He tried to take my inheritance, my home, my peace of mind. What I took from him was proportional to what he tried to take from me. Then stop second-guessing yourself. You did what you needed to do, and anyone who doesn't understand that hasn't lived through what you've lived through. We finished dinner and walked along the High Line, the elevated park that ran through Chelsea. It was October now, the weather turning crisp and beautiful. The city lights sparkled around us. What's next for you? James asked. Now that the divorce is almost final, now that you've got your settlement, what do you want? I don't know, I admitted. It was the first time I'd let myself think beyond the revenge, beyond the legal battle. I've been so focused on winning, on making Daniel pay, that I haven't thought about what comes after. Maybe that's what you need to figure out now. James suggested. Who is Catherine Montgomery, or Catherine Rhodes again, I suppose, when she's not fighting a war? Who was I? I'd been a wife, then a betrayed wife, then a woman seeking justice. But what was I when the dust settled and the battles were won? I think I want to go to the beach house, I said. Spend some real time there. Make it mine again, not ours, not his, mine. That sounds perfect, James said. The following week, I did exactly that. I took a leave of absence from work, packed up my car, and drove out to the Hamptons. It was late October, past the tourist season, and the beach was quiet and empty. Perfect. The first night was hard. I kept seeing ghosts. Daniel and me on our wedding day, Amber on the deck with her mimosa. The 3 lawyers sitting around the dining room table as I served Daniel his eviction notice. The house was full of memories, and not all of them were bad, which somehow made it worse. But I stayed. I forced myself to walk through each room, to sit in each space, to reclaim it inch by inch. I moved furniture around, changing the layout so it didn't look like it had when Daniel and I used it. I took down the photos of us and replaced them with photos of my grandparents, my brother, my friends. I bought new linens for the bed, new towels for the bathroom, new dishes for the kitchen. Slowly, methodically, I erased Daniel from the space. And I started to remember why I loved this house in the first place. The sound of the waves, the smell of salt air, the way the light came through the windows in the morning, the peace of having nowhere to be and nothing to do except exist. One morning, about a week into my stay, I was having coffee on the deck when I saw someone walking down the beach. As they got closer, I realized it was Amber. My first instinct was to go inside, to avoid the confrontation. But then I thought, no, this is my beach, my house, I'm not hiding. She saw me around the same time I recognized her. She stopped, clearly debating whether to turn around. Then, to my surprise, she walked toward me. Hi, she said when she reached the edge of my property. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here. I'll go. It's a public beach, I said. You can walk wherever you want. She nodded but didn't move. We stood there in awkward silence. How are you? She finally asked, and she sounded genuinely curious. I'm fine, I said. Then, because what did I have to lose? Actually, I'm better than fine, I'm free. I read about the settlement, Amber said quietly. I'm glad you, I'm glad you won. Are you? I asked, not accusingly, just honestly. Yeah, she said. I am. What he did to you, what he did to both of us, really, it was wrong. I'm sorry I was a part of it. I studied her. She looked different than she had that day on the deck. Older somehow, less polished, more real. Did he promise you the same things he promised me? I asked. Forever, partnership, a future together. She laughed bitterly. Yeah, and about a week after you kicked me out, he dropped me completely. Blocked my number, wouldn't return my calls, had his lawyer send me a cease and desist letter saying I was harassing him. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Don't be. You tried to warn me, and I learned an expensive lesson about believing men who cheat on their wives. There was another silence, but this one felt less awkward. Two women who'd been manipulated by the same man, standing on a beach, acknowledging the damage. I hope you find someone better, Amber said. Someone who deserves you. I hope I find myself first, I replied. The person I was before I let a man define me. She smiled. That sounds like a good plan. She walked away down the beach, and I watched her go. I didn't forgive her exactly, but I didn't hate her anymore either. She was just another casualty of Daniel's selfishness, just like I was. That afternoon, I got a call from Patricia. The divorce is final, she said. As of noon today, you are officially Catherine Rhodes again. Catherine Rhodes, my name, my identity, not tied to Daniel anymore. How do you feel? Patricia asked. Like I can breathe, I said. That night, I built a fire in the beach house fireplace. I'd brought a box of things from the apartment, things I'd been meaning to go through. Old photos, love letters, mementos from the relationship. One by one, I went through them. Some I kept, the ones from the early days when I still believed the love was real. Those were part of my history, and I wasn't going to erase them. But the rest, the things from the years when he was already betraying me, the false memories and hollow gestures, those went into the fire. I watched them burn, watched the photos curl and blacken, watched the letters turn to ash, watched 6 years of my life go up in smoke. And when the fire died down and there was nothing left but embers, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Daniel was gone, the marriage was over, the revenge was complete, and I was still here, still standing, still strong. The next morning, I woke up early and walked down to the beach. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I stood at the water's edge and let the waves wash over my feet. This was my beach, my house, my life, and no one, not Daniel, not anyone, could take that from me again. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, content, comfortable, blissfully unaware that her marriage was a lie. I couldn't go back to being her. Wouldn't want to, honestly, because that woman was trusting to the point of naivety. She gave people the benefit of the doubt even when they didn't deserve it. She sacrificed her own peace to avoid conflict. The woman I was now, she was harder, yes, less trusting, more guarded, but she was also stronger. She knew her worth. She demanded respect. She didn't let people walk over her or take advantage of her kindness. Was that growth, or was it damage? Maybe it was both. I walked back to the house, made myself breakfast, and sat on the deck with my coffee. I had decisions to make about what came next. Where to live, what to do with my career, how to rebuild my life from the ground up. But I had time, I had resources, and most importantly, I had myself back. My phone buzzed, a text from James. How's the reclamation project going? I smiled and typed back, better every day. And it was true. Every day in that house, I felt more like myself and less like the woman Daniel had tried to shape me into. Every morning I woke up without him was a morning I got to choose who I wanted to be. The revenge had been satisfying, I won't lie. Watching Daniel lose everything had felt like justice. But this, sitting on my deck in the home I'd saved, breathing air that was mine alone to breathe, this felt like victory. Because the best revenge wasn't just making him pay for what he'd done. It was surviving it, thriving despite it, becoming someone stronger on the other side of it. Daniel had tried to break me. Instead, he'd freed me. And that, I thought as I watched the waves crash against the shore, was the real win. I'd been at the beach house for 3 weeks when something happened that I didn't expect. Something that made me realize the revenge wasn't quite finished yet. I was working in the study, going through some paperwork related to my family's property portfolio, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone. Patricia knew I was here, but she would have called first. James was back in London. For a moment, my heart jumped, some old instinct wondering if it was Daniel. It was. I watched from the window as he got out of a car that wasn't his, a rental, maybe, or borrowed. He'd sold his luxury cars as part of the settlement. He stood there for a moment, just looking at the house, and even from a distance I could see how much he'd changed. Thinner, older, defeated. Every instinct told me to call the police. He wasn't supposed to be here. The settlement agreement explicitly barred him from this property, but curiosity won out. I wanted to know what could possibly bring him back here after everything. I opened the door before he could knock. "You're not supposed to be here, Daniel." "I know," he said. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept. "I know I'm not, but please, Catherine, just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I should have said no. Should have called Patricia, called the police, enforced the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish. But there was something in his face, something broken and desperate, that made me pause. 5 minutes, I said. On the deck, you don't come inside. He nodded, grateful for even that much. We walked around to the deck, the same deck where I'd confronted Amber, where I'd spent the last 3 weeks reclaiming my peace. Having him here felt like a violation, but I wanted to hear what he had to say. We stood at the railing, both looking out at the ocean instead of at each other. "I lost everything," he said finally. "The company, the apartment, my savings, my reputation. Everything I spent 15 years building is gone." "You did that to yourself," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I know, I'm not here to argue about that or ask for sympathy. I just needed you to understand something." He turned to look at me. "I never understood what this house meant to you. Not really. I saw it as an asset, as property, as something valuable. But I didn't understand that it was part of your soul." I didn't say anything, just waited. These past few weeks, I've been staying with my brother, in his guest room. Sleeping on a bed that's not mine, in a space that's temporary and borrowed. And for the first time, I understood what it means to not have a place that's yours. To not have that one spot in the world where you feel completely safe. "You had that," I said quietly. "We had a home together, you destroyed it." "I know, and I destroyed this place for you too. Your sanctuary. The one your grandfather gave you. I turned it into something ugly, and now you can't even think about it without thinking about what I did." He wasn't wrong. Even now, 3 weeks into reclaiming it, I still saw ghosts here. Still felt the violation of what he'd done. "When you served me that eviction notice," Daniel continued, "and I saw the property value listed, $9.6 million, I remember thinking that was just a number, just money. But it wasn't, was it? That number represented everything your grandfather built, everything he wanted you to have, and I tried to steal it." "You did steal it," I corrected. "For 8 months, you stole this house from me. You gave it to another woman. You tried to refinance it without my knowledge. You treated my inheritance like it was yours to use." "The eviction notice," he said, and his voice cracked. "It wasn't just kicking me out of a property. It was you taking back everything I'd tried to take from you. Your home, your legacy, your sense of safety. That $9.6 million wasn't about the money. It was about what the house represents." I turned to look at him fully. "Why are you here, Daniel? What do you want?" "I don't want anything," he said. "I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I did. Not just the affair, not just the fraud. I understand that I tried to take your soul and sell it for my own benefit. And I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it's too late, but I needed to say it." We stood there in silence. The waves crashed below us. A seagull called overhead. The wind moved through the beach grass with a sound like whispering. "I don't forgive you," I said finally. "I don't know if I ever will." "I don't expect you to," Daniel replied. "I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I destroyed. and I have to live with that for the rest of my life. Yes, I said simply, you do. He nodded, accepting it. I'll go. I'm sorry for showing up like this. I needed to see this place one more time, to understand what I lost. He started to walk away, back toward his rental car, and I surprised myself by calling after him. Daniel. He stopped, turned back. You didn't just lose this house, I said. You lost me, the person who loved you, the person who would have stood by you through anything if you'd just been honest. That's what you destroyed, and no amount of money or property or settlement can replace that. His eyes filled with tears. I know, Catherine, I know. Good, I said. Now leave and don't come back. I watched him drive away, watched his car disappear down the private road, and I realized something important. That conversation, that final confrontation, that was the real eviction notice, not the legal document Patricia had served months ago. This was me, standing in my house, looking the man who'd betrayed me in the eye and telling him he no longer had any place in my life. The $9.6 million eviction wasn't about the property value. It was about the value of what he'd tried to steal. My peace, my safety, my legacy, my home. And every penny of that $9.6 million represented me taking it all back. I walked through the house after he left, room by room. And for the first time since I'd discovered his betrayal, I didn't see the violation. I saw my grandfather's love. I saw my childhood summers. I saw my future. This house was mine. Completely, totally, irrevocably mine. And Daniel's eviction from it, from my life, from my heart, was final. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. Daniel was just here, I said. What, Catherine, he violated the agreement. We can. It's okay, I interrupted. He came to apologize, he left when I asked him to, and I think that was the closure I needed. Are you sure you're okay? Patricia asked, concern in her voice. I'm sure, I said, and I meant it. It's really over now, all of it. That night I did something I hadn't done since before the betrayal. I invited people over. Not a lot of people, just a few close friends. Jessica, who'd first alerted me to someone being at the beach house. My brother, who flew back from London for the weekend. A few others who'd stood by me through everything. We had dinner on the deck. We drank wine and told stories and laughed. Real laughter, the kind that comes from genuine joy, not the hollow kind I'd been faking for months. To Catherine, Jessica said, raising her glass, who taught us all that you don't get mad, you get even. And then you get free, I added, clinking my glass against hers. As the night went on and my friends filled my house with warmth and love and life, I realized what the eviction notice had really accomplished. It hadn't just removed Daniel from my property. It had removed him from my future. It had created space for new memories, new relationships, new versions of myself to emerge. The house my grandfather had given me, the $9.6 million sanctuary, was finally fulfilling its purpose. It was making me feel safe again, not from physical danger, but from the kind of emotional violation Daniel had inflicted. Here I was protected. Here I was home. And no one, not Daniel, not anyone, could take that from me ever again. Later, after everyone had left and I was alone again, I stood on the deck under the stars. The ocean stretched out before me, endless and powerful and constant. It had been here before my pain, and it would be here long after. That perspective helped. I thought about the title of my story, the one that would define this chapter of my life. My husband let his affair live in our beach house. He didn't expect to see the $9.6M eviction notice. But that wasn't quite right, because it wasn't our beach house. It had never been ours. It was mine. Always had been, always would be. And the eviction notice wasn't just a legal document. It was a declaration, a boundary, a line in the sand that said, this far and no further. Daniel had expected me to be weak, to forgive, to look the other way like so many betrayed spouses do. He hadn't expected me to value myself enough to fight back. Hadn't expected me to have the resources and the determination to win. The $9.6 million eviction notice wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was me saying that my inheritance, my legacy, my peace of mind had value. Actual, quantifiable, undeniable value. And anyone who tried to take that from me would pay the price. I smiled into the darkness. Tomorrow, I'd start planning what came next. New projects, new goals, new dreams that were mine alone. But tonight, I just stood in my reclaimed sanctuary and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Whole, the months that followed Daniel's final visit were transformative in ways I didn't expect. Winning the settlement had felt good. Reclaiming the beach house had felt necessary. But actually rebuilding my life, that felt like coming back to life after being underwater for too long. The fallout from the divorce continued to ripple through Daniel's world like an earthquake with endless aftershocks. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't pay attention. Not because I was obsessed with his downfall, but because watching him face consequences was a necessary part of my healing. It confirmed that justice, real justice, had been served. Marcus kept me updated, not because I asked, but because she felt I deserved to know how things played out. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Daniel's company officially dissolved. His former partners had forced him out, buying his remaining stake for pennies on the dollar just to be rid of the liability he represented. The fraud allegations, even though I hadn't pursued criminal charges, had made him toxic in the industry. He tried to start a consulting firm, Marcus told me over coffee one afternoon in Manhattan. Reached out to some of his old contacts, offered his expertise in commercial development. Let me guess, I said. No one was interested. Worse than that, 2 of the people he contacted forwarded his emails to business publications with commentary about his audacity. It made the rounds on industry blogs. He's essentially blacklisted. Part of me felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, but an awareness of how completely I'd destroyed his professional life. Then I remembered the forged documents, the $470,000, amber in my beach house. The twinge disappeared. What's he doing for work? I asked. Last I heard, he's working for his brother's landscaping company. Manual labor, residential properties. It's honest work, but it's a far cry from closing multi-million-dollar commercial deals. From penthouse offices to pushing lawnmowers, the fall was poetic in its completeness. But the professional consequences weren't the only fallout Daniel faced. The social consequences were just as devastating, maybe more so for someone who'd valued his reputation as much as he had. Jessica reported that he'd been quietly removed from the membership rolls at his exclusive golf club. Too many members had expressed discomfort. The charity boards he'd sat on had asked for his resignation. The social circle we'd traveled in had closed ranks against him. I saw him at Whole Foods last week, Jessica told me. He looked right through me, like if he didn't acknowledge me, I wouldn't acknowledge him. Did you say anything? I asked. No, what was there to say? His face said it all. He looked haunted, Kath, like a ghost of who he used to be. I tried to imagine the Daniel I'd married, confident and charismatic, reduced to avoiding eye contact in grocery stores. It was almost too sad to contemplate. Almost. His family's not speaking to him, my brother reported after running into Daniel's cousin at a business conference. His mother actually called you to apologize. Did you know that? I did know. She'd left a voicemail I'd never returned. What was I supposed to say to the woman who'd raised the man who'd betrayed me? It wasn't her fault, but I wasn't ready for that conversation. The most surprising fallout came from an unexpected source. Amber reached out to me 6 months after the divorce was final. I'm writing a book, she said when we met for coffee. She'd asked to see me, and after some hesitation, I'd agreed. About my experience, about being the other woman and not knowing I was being lied to, about how men like Daniel manipulate young women. Are you using his real name? I asked. No, changing details, but the story is real. My agent thinks it could help other women avoid the same situation. I studied her. She'd changed even more since our encounter on the beach, looked more mature, more grounded, less like the girl playing dress-up in my beach house and more like an actual adult. I wanted your permission, she continued. I know you don't owe me anything, but I didn't want to tell this story without making sure you were okay with it. Tell your story, I said. If it helps even one woman see the red flags I missed, then something good comes from all this pain. The book came out 9 months later. It didn't use Daniel's name, but anyone who'd followed our divorce could connect the dots. It became a modest bestseller, featured on morning shows and book clubs. Amber donated a portion of the proceeds to organizations supporting women leaving abusive relationships. Daniel tried to sue her for defamation. The case was dismissed almost immediately. Truth, as I'd learned, is an absolute defense, and Amber's truth, like mine, was documented and undeniable. Meanwhile, my life was expanding in ways I'd never imagined during my marriage. Without Daniel's constant presence, his opinions, his needs, his betrayals taking up space in my head, I discovered parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. I'd always loved architecture, but had never pursued it beyond managing my family's properties. Now, with time and resources and freedom, I enrolled in design courses, started sketching ideas for renovating some of the older buildings in our portfolio, found joy in creation rather than just maintenance. I traveled, not the kind of traveling Daniel and I had done, luxury resorts and 5-star hotels where every moment was scheduled and photographed for social media. I went to places I'd always wanted to see, spent 2 weeks in Japan staying in traditional ryokans, hiked through Patagonia with a women's adventure group, took a cooking class in Tuscany just because it sounded fun. Each trip, each experience, each moment of doing exactly what I wanted without having to consult or compromise or consider anyone else's preferences was a small reclamation of myself. I also started saying no to social obligations I didn't want to attend, to people who took more than they gave, to expectations that didn't serve me. The old Catherine would have worried about being polite, about maintaining relationships, about what people thought. The new Catherine understood that her peace was worth more than anyone's approval. "You're different," my mother said during one of her visits to the beach house. We'd never been particularly close, but the divorce had somehow brought us together. Shared experience of marriage ending, maybe. Harder, but in a good way, like you found your spine. "I always had a spine," I replied. "I just forgot to use it for a while." "Your grandfather would be proud," she said, looking out at the ocean. "Not of the divorce, obviously, but of how you handled it, how you fought for what was yours." That meant more than she probably knew. My grandfather had been my hero, my role model. Knowing he would have approved of my actions, even the ruthless ones, gave me peace. The beach house had fully transformed back into my sanctuary. I'd finished the renovations, changing enough that it felt fresh and new while keeping the elements that connected it to my grandfather's vision. The master bedroom where Amber had slept now had completely different furniture, different colors, a different energy. I could sleep there without seeing ghosts. I'd started hosting gatherings there. Small ones, intimate dinners with people I genuinely cared about. The house filled with laughter and conversation, and the kind of authentic connection I'd been missing during my marriage. One evening, sitting on the deck with Jessica and a few other close friends, someone asked the question I'd been dreading. "So, are you dating anyone?" The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me with that mixture of curiosity and concern that people reserve for divorcees discussing romance. "No," I said simply, "and I'm not looking." "Not at all," Jessica pressed gently. "Catherine, you're 36, you're beautiful, successful, free. You could have anyone you want." "That's exactly why I'm not looking," I explained. "For the first time in my adult life, I'm complete on my own. I don't need anyone to validate me or complete me or give my life meaning. And until I'm absolutely certain I want to share this life with someone rather than needing to, I'm staying single." The truth was, the idea of dating terrified me. Not because I was scared of men or romance, but because I was scared of losing myself again. Of compromising my peace for someone else's presence. Of trusting someone with my heart and having them shatter it like Daniel had. Maybe someday I'd be ready. Maybe I'd meet someone who made me want to take that risk again. But right now, in this moment, I was perfectly content with my own company. A year after the divorce was finalized, I got an unexpected email from Daniel. "Catherine, It read, "I hope you're well. I'm not writing to ask for anything or to rehash the past. I'm in therapy now, working through a lot of things I should have addressed years ago. My therapist suggested I write to you not to send necessarily, but to articulate what I've learned. I'm sending this because I think you deserve to know that your actions, as painful as they were for me, probably saved my life. I was spiraling, living a lie, destroying everything good in my pursuit of things that didn't matter. Losing everything forced me to confront who I'd become. I'm working construction now. My brother's company. It's hard work, physical work, and I'm terrible at it. But it's honest. And for the first time in years, I can sleep at night without the weight of my lies crushing me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that the woman who served me that eviction notice, who fought back, who refused to be a victim, she taught me more about integrity than I'd learned in my entire life before that. I hope you've found peace. I hope the beach house feels like home again. And I hope, someday, you can look back on our marriage and remember the good parts without the bad parts poisoning them. You deserved better than I gave you. I know that now. Daniel." I read the email 3 times, felt the familiar anger rise, then subside. This wasn't manipulation. It wasn't him trying to weasel back into my life. It was just closure. From his end, maybe the closure he needed. I didn't respond, didn't need to, but I saved the email in a folder labeled evidence of growth. Not his growth, though that was clear. Mine, because a year ago that email would have sent me spiraling. Would have made me question everything, wonder if I'd been too harsh, feel guilty for his downfall. Now I felt nothing but a calm acceptance. He'd made his choices. I'd made mine. We were both living with the consequences. His consequences involved losing everything and rebuilding from scratch. Mine involved reclaiming everything and building something better. I'd choose my consequences over his any day. 2 years after serving Daniel the eviction notice that changed everything, I found myself back on the deck of my beach house on a perfect September morning. The anniversary of discovering his betrayal had passed without the emotional devastation I'd expected. Instead, it had been just another day. Peaceful, productive, mine. I'd been thinking a lot about endings and beginnings, about how the worst thing that ever happened to me had somehow led to the best version of myself, about how devastation and transformation are sometimes the same thing, just viewed from different angles. The beach house project was complete, not just the renovations, but the emotional reclamation. I could walk through every room without seeing ghosts, could sleep in the master bedroom without remembering Amber, could sit on this deck without reliving the confrontation. The house was fully, completely, joyfully mine again. But more than that, I'd started using it for something meaningful. Once a month, I hosted a weekend retreat for women going through divorces, especially women dealing with infidelity or financial abuse. I brought in therapists, lawyers, financial advisors. We did yoga on the beach, had group therapy sessions in the living room, shared stories over wine on this very deck. "You're doing God's work," one woman told me after a particularly emotional weekend. "I came here feeling broken and worthless. I'm leaving knowing I can survive this." "You can do more than survive," I told her. "You can thrive, I'm living proof." And I was. The property management business I'd inherited had grown under my leadership. The architecture and design work I'd started as a hobby had turned into a legitimate secondary career. I'd been featured in several publications, not as the woman from that dramatic divorce, but as a successful businesswoman and designer in my own right. My relationship with my family had deepened. James and I talked weekly now, real conversations about real things. My mother and I had found common ground. Even my father, who I'd barely spoken to since my parents' divorce, had reached out to express his pride in how I'd handled everything. Friendships that had been surface level during my marriage had become profound. I'd learned to spot the people who showed up when things were hard, not just when things were fun. Those people became my chosen family. And my relationship with myself, that was the biggest transformation of all. I'd spent so much of my life being what other people needed, the dutiful daughter, the successful heiress, the perfect wife. I'd molded myself to fit into spaces that were never designed for my actual shape. Now I took up space unapologetically, Spoke my mind without softening my words to make others comfortable. Set boundaries without guilt. Pursued my own interests without justifying them to anyone. Was I harder than I used to be? Absolutely. Less trusting? Definitely. But I was also more authentic, more confident, more genuinely happy than I'd ever been in my marriage. One afternoon, I was working in the study when I got a call from Patricia. We'd stayed in touch, had actually become friends beyond the attorney-client relationship. "I have news," she said. "Daniel filed for bankruptcy." I absorbed this. When? Last week. Despite the construction work, he can't keep up with his remaining debts. The settlement he paid you basically wiped him out, and he hasn't been able to recover financially. "How do you feel about that?" Patricia asked carefully. I thought about it, really examined my emotions. "Neutral," I said finally. "A year ago, I would have felt vindicated. 2 years ago, I would have wanted him to suffer more. But now, it's just a fact. He made choices, I responded, and this is where those choices led him." "That's growth," Patricia observed. "Or exhaustion," I replied. "Maybe I just don't have the energy to hate him anymore." But it was more than that. I'd learned something crucial through this entire experience. Revenge, real revenge, isn't about making the other person suffer. It's about making yourself whole. The settlement money, the eviction notice, the public exposure of his fraud, none of that had healed me. What healed me was reclaiming my power, rebuilding my life, and refusing to let his betrayal define my future. Daniel's bankruptcy was his problem, not my victory. That evening, I sat down and wrote something I'd been thinking about for months. Not a letter to Daniel, but a letter to the woman I'd been before all of this started. The trusting, somewhat naive Catherine who'd believed her marriage was solid. "Dear past Catherine," I wrote, "I'm writing to you from 2 years in the future, and I need you to know something. What's about to happen to you is going to break your heart. It's going to shatter your sense of safety and trust. It's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about love and marriage and yourself. But you're going to survive it. More than that, you're going to use it to become someone stronger, wiser, more authentically yourself than you ever imagined possible. When you find out about the affair, you're going to want to look away, to pretend you didn't see it, to give him the benefit of the doubt. Don't. Trust your instincts. They're right. When you discover the fraud, you're going to feel violated in ways you didn't know were possible. That's valid. Your anger is valid. Your hurt is valid. Don't let anyone tell you to forgive before you're ready. When you fight back, people are going to call you vindictive. They're going to say you're being too harsh, too calculating, too cold. Ignore them. They haven't walked in your shoes. They don't get a vote. The $9.6 million eviction notice you're going to serve. It's not about the money. It's about drawing a line. About saying, "This is mine, and you don't get to take it." About valuing yourself enough to fight for what you deserve. You're going to question yourself a lot in the months ahead. Wonder if you're doing the right thing. Wonder if you're becoming someone you don't recognize. That's normal. Transformation is uncomfortable. Growth is painful, but it's worth it. 2 years from now, you'll be sitting in the beach house grandfather left you, the one you saved from being stolen. You'll be running a business you love, pursuing passions you'd forgotten, hosting weekends for women who need the same strength you've found. You'll be alone but not lonely, free not abandoned, powerful not broken. The betrayal is going to hurt more than you think you can bear, but you can bear it. And on the other side of that pain is a version of yourself you're going to be proud to know. Trust the process, trust yourself, and remember, the best revenge is becoming someone who no longer needs revenge. You've got this. I know because I'm you, and I've already done it. Love, future Catherine. I folded the letter and put it in the box with the few mementos I'd kept from my marriage. Someday, maybe I'd share it with the women who came to my retreats. Or maybe it would just stay there, a reminder of how far I'd traveled. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I thought about the lessons I'd learned through this nightmare-turned transformation. Lesson 1, trust yourself. I'd had instincts about Daniel for months before I found concrete evidence. I talked myself out of them because I didn't want to seem paranoid or suspicious. Never again. My intuition is valuable and I'll honor it. Lesson 2. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Daniel's betrayal said everything about him and nothing about me. I wasn't lacking anything. He was just lacking integrity. Lesson 3. Kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. I'd been so focused on being understanding, on giving Daniel the benefit of the doubt, that I'd sacrificed my own well-being. Real kindness includes being kind to yourself. Lesson 4. It's okay to fight back. Women are socialized to be accommodating, to smooth things over, to avoid conflict. But sometimes conflict is necessary. Sometimes fighting back is the most self-loving thing you can do. Lesson 5. Revenge is empty, but justice is essential. The satisfaction I got from Daniel's downfall was fleeting. The lasting peace came from knowing I'd stood up for myself, protected my assets, and ensured consequences for his actions. And the most important lesson, you are complete on your own. I'd spent so much of my adult life in a relationship, defining myself partially through that partnership. Now I knew I was whole all by myself. Anything I added to my life in the future would be an enhancement, not a completion. My phone buzzed. A text from one of the women who'd attended last month's retreat. Just signed my divorce papers. Remembered what you said about endings being beginnings. Feeling scared but also free. Thank you for showing me it's possible. I smiled and texted back. You've got this, and you're going to be amazed at who you become on the other side. Because that was the real ending to this story. Not Daniel's bankruptcy or his fall from grace. Not the settlement money or the legal victory. The real ending was me, sitting in my reclaimed sanctuary, helping other women find their own strength, living a life that was authentically mine. The $9.6 million eviction notice had done exactly what I needed it to do. It had removed Daniel from my property, my life, and my future. It had established my value, both financially and emotionally. It had drawn a line that said, this far and no further. But more than that, it had been the catalyst for my transformation. The moment I decided to fight back instead of accept mistreatment. The moment I chose myself over keeping the peace. If I could go back and prevent Daniel's betrayal, would I? A year ago, my answer would have been an immediate yes. But now, sitting here in the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage, I wasn't so sure. Not because I'm grateful for the pain. I'm not. The betrayal was cruel and the discovery was devastating, and the months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. But I'm grateful for who I became because of it, for the strength I found, for the clarity I gained, for the life I built when forced to start over. Daniel thought he was taking something from me. He thought installing his affair in my beach house, trying to steal my inheritance, living his double life. He thought all of that made him clever and me foolish. What he didn't understand was that you can't steal someone's power. You can only make them forget they have it. And the moment I remembered, the moment I decided to fight back, that was the moment he lost and I won. The eviction notice was just paperwork. The real eviction happened in my heart, the day I decided Daniel Montgomery no longer had a place in my life, my thoughts, or my future. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, I stood on my deck in my house, living my life, and felt nothing but peace. This was my ending, and my beginning, and everything in between. I'd been betrayed by the person I trusted most. I'd discovered fraud and lies and a complete double life. I'd fought back with everything I had. I'd won a settlement that left my ex-husband financially destroyed. I'd reclaimed my inheritance, my home, and most importantly, myself. And if I had to summarize everything I'd learned, everything I'd been through, every painful step of this journey, it would be this. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's becoming someone who no longer needs enemies. It's building a life so full and rich and authentically yours that the person who betrayed you becomes irrelevant. It's turning your pain into purpose and your devastation into determination. Daniel had tried to take everything from me. Instead, he'd given me the greatest gift possible, the gift of knowing my own strength. And that, more than any settlement, more than any eviction notice, more than any revenge, was priceless. I walked inside my house, locked the doors, and went to bed in the home my grandfather had given me. The home I'd saved. The home that was mine, completely and forever. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to be the woman I'd fought so hard to become. But tonight, I simply rested in the knowledge that I'd survived the worst and come out stronger. And that was more than enough.